Fade from black. An image appears. Two female silhouettes in fetal position, rotating juxtaposed over a pink rose. The first-time viewer, who may not even know yet the identity of these two figures, is sent a subconscious message. Cycles are everywhere. We of course soon learn the identity of the figures appearing at the start of the opening. Utena and Anthe are destined to repeat many cycles of similar events without fully realizing it. This is implied by the fetal position of the two figures. They are yet to be truly born. They have yet to crack the so-called shell of the world in an act of revolution, like the proverbial chicks they are. Even before encountering this opening image to the entire show, as well as every episode, reference to cycles is also found in the name of the show itself. As any native English speaker is well aware, revolution refers to both a physical rotation of an object as well as a great restructuring of a society or system. When we look at the Japanese title of the show, Shoujo Kakume Utena, the Japanese word for revolution, kakume, has no connotation with a physical revolution, and only the latter sense of the word. Looking at the kanji of this word, we have the kanji for leather and the kanji signifying life, an order or command, as well as fate. Initially, this makes little sense, but a peek into the etymology of the word reveals that kaku, the first kanji, is associated not with the literal meaning of the character, but the verb for to make new, aratameru, which it can be alternately used to spell. Inochi, the second kanji, in this case is a shortening of temme, a word used to denote a dynasty, but with a literal meaning of the divine will or command. Combining these two meanings, we find the most literal translation of the Japanese kakume to be a change to the divine will. This is a word which truly suggests the near impossibility of revolution from the perspective of an individual in most ordinary circumstances. Whether or not the current reign or dynasty is a literal manifestation of a god's will or not, it might as well be for an individual trapped in the current system where everything and every person seems to conform to this invisible divine will. Furthermore, the word order of the Japanese title is Girl Revolution Utena, opposed to Revolutionary Girl Utena, which translated back into the Japanese would instead become Kakume Teki Shoujo Utena. This suggests that Utena herself is a girl revolution, an individual force powerful enough to thwart a divine will. While the Japanese word for revolution does not have the additional meaning of physical revolution included in the English word, it is without doubt that the creators were consciously aware of this additional meaning, which is frequently manifested in the use of rotating symbols throughout the show. Perhaps the most often employed rotating symbol is the rotating rose, which sometimes appears over Utena as she de-roses her opponents in duels, as well as other situations. A Japanese viewer of the show will likely connect the symbology of the rose to Versailles no Bara, the Rose of Versailles, a manga-turned cultural phenomenon set during the beginning of the French Revolution and featuring main characters Marie Antoinette and fictional Oscar, a girl-turned-prince who serves as Antoinette's bodyguard. Something about the name Antoinette sounds familiar. Indeed, Revolutionary Girl Utena pays homage to this manga in multiple aspects, most notably the art style and the rose symbology, though I haven't watched or read The Rose of Versailles myself. Considering this connection, it is likely that the rotating rose serves as the symbol of revolution in itself, as well as a kind of censor bar, suggesting something mystical or beyond intellectual understanding about the action taking place. The rotating rose in the context of duels suggests a revolution without resolution to the show as a whole, so a kind of mini-revolution within the greater revolution and revelation, which is the show as a whole. A cycle within a cycle. These duels are also juxtaposed onto larger cycles within the show, such as the three main arcs. As Utena goes on to defeat duelist after duelist, it is not always clear that the world around her is any different than it was before. But as I see it, these duels bear small changes which accumulate gradually. As an example of this in action, we can observe how Udna's second duel with Toga in episode 12 served to send the former ringleader of the dueling system into a deep depression, making way for a new force to exploit the mysterious rose-crest dueling system of the Academy. Episode 12 can be viewed in the context of a number of sequential steps belonging to the initiation stage of Joseph Campbell's model of the hero's journey. In the context of the story of Udna up to episode 12, the series of 5 duels, excluding the first with Saionji, which is more akin to the belly of the whale stage, and ending with her defeat by Toga in episode 11, could be interpreted as the road of trials. Additionally, throughout these duels, the supernatural power manifested as Udna's hazy memory of the prince she met in her youth could be seen as the meeting with the goddess, or perhaps God in this case. Note that this power is not likely related to Akio in more than a superficial sense, as Udna became impressed with the platonic ideal of being a prince upon her childhood encounter with Akio, not because of Akio himself, despite Akio's failed later attempts to convince her otherwise. Through the course of episode 12, Udna proceeds through the latter 4 stages of the initiation: woman, or in this case man, as temptress, atonement of the father/abyss, apotheosis, and the ultimate boon. Toga acts as a tempter to Udna, though Udna doesn't seem tempted in the slightest. Nevertheless, it adds insult to the injury of her previous defeat. In her weak state, Udna falls to an abyss of depression, and is only brought back to her senses by Wakaba, in the stage of atonement of the father/abyss, with Wakaba fitting the description of the powerful presence with the most influence over Udna's life. Next, Udna has a moment of realization that she has no idea how to act in her non-princely attire, as it is simply not her, and is motivated to fearlessly confront Toga. This is apotheosis. The final duel of the first arc sees Toga humiliated by defeat after losing to Udna, wielding the remaining stub of the sword lent to her by Judy. Note that Judy's gesture in lending a sword to Udna signifies a change in her previous cold demeanor towards Udna, a sign of gradual accumulation of revolutionary power in itself. Of course, in the end, when she wins the fight, she also wins back Anthe, who, though dominated by the system of the Academy, nevertheless begins to show a preference for Udna, revealed by her treasuring of the handkerchief lent to her by Udna earlier in the episode. Though there is not a significant return sequence following the events of episode 12, the initial arc of Udna can be interpreted as a smaller hero's journey within a larger one encompassing the entire show. Progress has been made through a number of smaller revolutions with individual duelists, culminating in a larger revolution to the dueling system as a whole, triggered by Toga's initial defeat. This hero's journey within a larger hero's journey is yet another example of how the show employs cycles within cycles. The idea of cycles within cycles as a concept also concretely manifests as a symbol in Revolutionary Girl Udna, the spiral staircase. The spiral staircase represents how cycles exist and, if observed correctly, can be discerned. However, with each revolution, there is some progress made. Though from a subjective standpoint it may feel similar, things are different. Like DNA, which is a literal spiral encompassing one's current life and all life that came before, building sequentially from relative simplicity to mind-numbing complexity, the characters and interpersonal relationships develop intricately through the events of the show. Udna is seen in almost every episode of the series scaling this staircase with determination, showing that despite the seeming stasis of her surroundings, she has the strength to power on through a series of cycles. What gives her this strength is her ideal, which she pledges to stay true to as a child. Here is a moment where I think a Buddhist analogy is appropriate. One of the teachings of Japanese Buddhism is that the pearl of enlightenment lies within every living thing. While the self can accumulate obscuring illusions throughout the course of a life, the pearl of enlightenment still remains pristine deep within. For Udna, having stuck so close to her ideal, this Buddha nature remains relatively unclouded throughout her journey, At the crux of this spiral staircase representing the cycles of events within the show is the ultimate revolution or enlightenment, the complete obliteration of self or achievement of Buddhahood. In the epilogue of the final episode, it appears as though Utena has completely disappeared from the known universe of Otori Academy. It seems as though she is forgotten by everyone except Anthy and Akio. Akio does not believe in Utena's revolution because to him the world remains exactly the same, the only difference being that Utena is gone. Anthy, however, having awakened to her true self through Utena's compassionate touch, knows that Utena still exists in some sort of higher plane of existence, and sets out to find her. Whether or not Utena still literally exists or not is mostly irrelevant. Utena's love gives Anthy the strength she needs to truly love herself. By the end of the show, Utena has fully realized her potential and thus vanishes into the ether as though she has become Buddha. This is only possible because of the progress she's made through manifold trials, which are akin to a series of deaths and rebirths in a more than metaphorical sense, as Utena seems to suffer from a sort of amnesia about the reality-defying events that occur to her in almost every episode. Additionally, other characters seem to go through their own deaths and rebirths, particularly throughout the Black Rose saga, though this is a topic possibly worthy of a separate video. I've personally experienced life events that seem like a death and rebirth on a micro scale, and I'm sure others can relate to this as well. In fact, the very structure of our days, governed by the rising and setting of the sun, for most, can make every day seem like a mini death and transfiguration. The good thing about this is that any hardship can be turned into a learning experience and an opportunity to be reborn into a new stage of life. Part of my obsession with this show is the fact that no matter how many times I watch it, it doesn't get old. It might sound strange to some, but I truly do feel a bit like Anthy, saved and inspired by Utena to find her own happiness every time I watch through the show. This signifies to me cycles greater even than the show itself, as I integrate new information into the framework of the show and apply lessons and insights learned from the show to my own life with each viewing, discovering a little more in every repetition of the cycle. That's all I have to say for now on the subject of cycles in Utena. I focused more on the big picture of how I see cycles to apply to revolutionary girl Utena, ignoring a multitude of concrete symbols throughout the show. If I see it fit, I might consider making a part 2 to this video, but for now, I hope I have been mostly successful in explaining what I see to be one of the main structuring elements of revolutionary girl Utena. I was taken back by the support I received on my first Utena analysis for a small-time YouTuber like myself, so I hope you enjoyed this one as well. As always, thank you for watching, and I welcome any discussion and responses in the comments below or elsewhere.